Good day, everyone. Welcome to this video discussion on the types, ethics, and principles of communication. Just a recap, last Monday during our Google Meet session, we discussed about the characteristics, the process, the elements, and even the definitions of communication. So today, we will be focusing on the communication types, ethics, and principles. So this is actually the unit learning outcome B. So you can find that one in our sim. So further information, further details about the types, ethics, and principles, and all our topics will be found in our sim. So please refer to our sim. So let me begin. Let's talk about the classification of communication. So when we say classification, the types. Okay, so what are the types of communication? So we will begin with the type of communication according to the number of people involved. So there are different classifications, and one of those classifications is the number or communication based on how many people are involved in the communication process. So there are 5 in this classification. First is intrapersonal communication. When we say intrapersonal, this refers to the communication within yourself. So when you contemplate or when you reflect on something or when you ask something and then you answer your own question, then that is intrapersonal communication. There is still a two-way process because one of the characteristics of communication is it is a two-way process. Interpersonal, it is still two-way. Why? Because you ask yourself and then you also answer. Okay, the question you ask to yourself. Okay, so that is intrapersonal communication. Another one is interpersonal communication. So when we say interpersonal, that means there are at least 2 people involved in the communication process. So this is usually referred to as dyadic communication, meaning there are at least 2 people, okay, who are involved in the process. So for example, when you talk with your mother or when your father and mother talk about something or when you and your friend talk about your classes or your schedules, whatever that is. So that is interpersonal communication. The third one is group communication. When we say group communication, there are at least 3 or more than 3 people who are involved in the process. And these people can communicate with one another. They can respond to each other's questions. They can comment on the topics they discuss in their group. So they are, or that is group communication. They can discuss because that also depends on their relationship. Okay, so if they are a group of friends or if they are classmates or if they are co-employees, so that is group communication because they know the topic and they can comment on that or they can communicate with one another. So we call it group communication. The fourth one is public communication. So public communication is one directional flow. That means the person who dominates the communication process is the person who speaks in front or the speaker. Okay, so for example, when your teacher or when the guest speaker during your graduation ceremony talks about his or her experiences, his or her journey before he became or before she became successful, then there is public communication because you communicate with for example 50 people or 100 people in the hall. When you're inside the hall, then you speak with them or when you communicate with them, so the speaker is the one dominating the process and the flow is one directional. Okay, the audience can react, the audience can give feedback, but it could be in a form of clapping their hands or nodding their heads, or they could even ask questions after the speaker speaks or after the speaker talks about his or her topic. So we call it public communication. And lastly is mass communication. So mass communication is very purposeful because when people could not gather to discuss about a topic, then they use, okay, mass media It could be when you listen to the news using or on the radio, when you watch the news or headlines on the television, or when you read the news on the newspaper, then that is mass communication. Again, that is purposeful if you could not meet. Okay, so if you are in Tibungco, if you are in Buhangin, and then the event is here in Bahada, then that could be communicated or broadcasted using this. So that is mass communication. So these are the classifications when we talk about the communication according to the number of people involved. So please do not forget these things. Next is, let's talk about the type or classification of communication according to the medium employed. So we say the medium, how did you communicate? What did you use? Okay, so it could be, there are two mediums. Okay, so first is verbal communication, and the second one is non-verbal communication. So, for verbal communication, there are two types. We call it oral communication or spoken communication and written communication. There is a misconception. About verbal communication because others think that when we talk about verbal communication, it only refers to oral or spoken. But that is wrong because verbal refers to the type of communication that uses words. So written communication also uses words when you communicate or when an individual communicates. So that is still part of verbal communication. Again, you do not only focus on the oral or spoken, but oral and written. So we call it verbal. As long as the communication involves words in the process, then we call it verbal communication. Another one is the non-verbal communication. So this one is wordless. Okay, wordless messages. So that is when you communicate using signs and symbols or facial expressions or hand gestures or body language. Okay, so that is non-verbal communication. And please do remember that you can always, or you cannot separate, okay, or it is difficult to separate when we talk about verbal and non-verbal, unless it is written, okay? But if it's oral, verbal communication is always, it couldn't be separated with non-verbal communication because when you speak, there really is emotion. Or when you speak, you use hand gestures or you use body language. So it becomes effective if verbal for oral communication and non-verbal communication go together when you communicate. Okay? So if it's written, of course, it is very difficult if you use non-verbal communication because written is you just write. You will not know if he is maybe based on the tone of the letter or of the communication, you will know the emotion. However, it is not as evident when we talk about oral communication or when we use the oral communication. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Another one, okay, so since we talk about non-verbal communication, there are 5 types of non-verbal communication. So when we say kinesics, okay, kinesics is the movement. Okay, so that refers to the movement. And haptics refers to the sense of touch. So there, when you communicate, other people like to touch their friends or their family member. Okay, so that is haptics. And when we say vocalics, that refers to the tone, to the speed, okay, it is all about sounds, okay? So the way you speak, your tone, or the loudness or the softness of your voice. So those are under vocalics. And then when we say proxemics refers to the space, okay? It refers to the space. So other people or in other culture, they don't like if you talk with them very closely. Okay, when you talk with them, sometimes you really have to have distance, because for other culture that is rude, for other culture that is not appropriate. Okay, but for us Filipinos, we really like to touch one another, right? Okay, so that is proxemics. Again, it depends on the culture. Okay, another one is personal presentation and environment. Okay, so these are the 5 types of non-verbal communication. Okay, so yes, to explain further, kinesics. Okay, so this is one's body language, and then the way you stand, the way you sit, the way you move, your hand gestures, your arm gestures, the eye contact, okay, the facial expressions. These are all part of kinesics. Another one is haptics. Again, it is a study of touch that includes such as handshakes, kisses, and hugs. But again, as what I have said, you really have to know the culture of a person before you do this, because some might misinterpret it and they put malice to it. So make sure that you know the culture, and in their culture, it is just okay to handshake, to kiss, or to hug one another. Okay? And understanding of touch as part of nonverbal communication is also, as what I have said, deeply rooted on culture. For us Filipinos, we are fond of hugging one another if you miss one another and we see each other, and then handshaking and kissing, or kissing cheek to cheek. Okay, so there is haptics, but again, it depends on the culture. Vocalics, it is the study of paralanguage. So when you say paralanguage, that refers to the vocal qualities such as pitch, the highness or the lowness of your voice, the rate, the volume, the vocal quality, and verbal fillers. Okay, so they are all part of vocalics. And verbal fillers are sounds used to fill in gaps in our speech. Okay, so verbal fillers. So when you say sometimes when we forget what we say, we are fond of saying Okay, so those are verbal fillers. Okay, and then there is proxemics. Again, it refers to the study of space and how it affects communication. So how much space we take up, or how far away we are from the person we are communicating with. Sorry, this communicating with is telltale sign of our relationship with them. As what I have said, you have to know if that person allows you to communicate with you in a very close distance. So that depends on your relationship with a person, because there are intimate spaces that is for the closest friends, family, and romantic partners. We also have personal spaces that is for acquaintances and close friends. And then we also have social spaces that is for professional and casual interactions, and public spaces, usually formal, wherein people are more than 12 feet away from you. So you have to know your relationship with a person so that you will know how close you are, or how close you should be when you communicate with them. Okay? And for the last type of nonverbal communication, there is these are the personal presentation and environment. So when we say personal presentation, of course, the way you look, the way you dress up, the way you put makeup on your face, the way you put jewelry, or the way you choose jewelry, that speaks. It is also communicating with other people. Okay, so there are two. It is divided into two. For personal presentation, that is physical characteristics, and the artifacts. For the physical characteristics, that refers to the size, to the weight, to the height, and other physical features of your body. Okay, so they communicate with other people. And artifacts, so this refers to the jewelry, the clothes you wear, the body art, and your hairstyle. So they all communicate. Okay, the way you present yourself in front of other people, that is a form of communication, and that is non-verbal communication. And lastly is the environment. Okay, so these are the types of non-verbal communication. Now, let us talk about the ethics of communication. So, successful communication requires certain ethical rules for a communicator to follow. So, there are rules to follow. Okay, so Andrew Button, as cited in Casigador in 2018, suggests 4 basic rules to observe. So, when we communicate, we have to be reminded of these 4 ethical rules. First is you have to be honest. Second is you have to be open to other views. Third is you have to be committed. And fourth one is you have to build consensus. When you say honesty, remember that when you speak, especially when you want to inform other people, you do not want them to mislead, or you do not want to mislead them with the information you give. So you have to be honest. You have to be truthful. So when you speak, you have to make sure that everything is correct. It is based on a reliable source, okay? And of course, you have to give them the information they deserve because that is informational. So you have to be honest as much as possible, okay? So we avoid giving false information to people or to our friends, to our colleagues, and to other people. So we have to be honest. Okay? Honesty is the best policy. That may be a cliche, but that is golden. It is a golden rule. Honesty is the best policy. Okay? Next one is openness to other views. Please be reminded that we have different interpretations. We understand or we perceive things differently. We understand messages differently. So when you listen to the point of view or to the opinion of other people, then you are very open-minded. That means you can still learn a lot. Okay, so you do not only entertain your own ideas or your own thoughts. You also have to listen to the information or ideas of other people, because remember, communication is a two-way process. That means you learn something from them and they will also learn something from you. So when you are open to other views, then you will learn a lot of things. Okay? You will be enlightened. Remember that you have to learn and you also have to relearn, because sometimes we tend to stick to our ideas even if your ideas are not that or are not really very precise or very appropriate. So you have to learn how to relearn the ideas or the information you know. Okay, so we also have to listen to other people. Another one is commitment. Okay, so when you speak, make sure that you are engaging yourself in the discourse or in the communicative event. Okay, because when we say commitment, you really have to listen to the person who is speaking. You really have to listen to the information that other people share with you. Okay, so you have to be engaged in the communication process, because if you are not really committing yourself, then the process of communication will not be successful, will not be effective. Why? You will not, or the person will not, or the speaker or the sender will not receive an appropriate feedback or an effective feedback. Okay, so you really have to be engaged. You have to commit yourself in the discourse or in the conversation so that there is smooth flow of communication. So that is commitment. And lastly is you build consensus. This is related to number 2. Okay, because number 2, you have to be open to the views of other people. And building consensus is also learning how to listen to the views or to the ideas of other people. So remember, I have an idea. Your idea is also different from my idea. Your classmates' idea is also different from our ideas. Okay? But how do you build consensus? You meet, you brainstorm, and then you agree. Okay? This is my idea. This is your idea. That is your idea. how do we make it that we can come up with an idea that is not only focused on me, or not only his idea, or not only her idea. So you have to make sure that you also incorporate the ideas of other people when you build consensus, or when you listen to the ideas of other people. So that is building consensus to avoid conflict, to avoid arguments, or to avoid chaos. So we build consensus. Okay, so I hope that is clear. And then lastly is the principles of communication. Okay, so what are these principles? To be an effective communicator, we should be able to use some fundamental assumptions or rules. Okay, so these regulations or assumptions are called principles. So Casigador in 2019 enumerated at least 6 basic principles that could be utilized to make communication successful. So how do we make communication successful? So we have to be reminded of these 6. First is relevance. Second is be positive. Third is choose the best medium. Fourth is study your audience. 5 is be enthusiastic. 6 is maintain intense focus. So what's your relevance? When a person talks or speaks with you, make sure that what you respond is related to the idea being sent to you or being delivered to you, so that there is smooth flow of communication and there is effective feedback or effective process, or the process is effective. So it must be related to the topic that you are talking about, or topic within your group, or within that meeting, or within that session. Okay, another one is be positive. Make sure that when you communicate with other people, you have to be, or you have to have positive thoughts. Okay, you avoid negativity so that other people will also have the drive to share their ideas, will also be motivated to communicate with you. Hence, there is also smooth flow of communication. So you always have to greet them. You always have to make sure that you are bringing positivity when you speak. Okay, I'm not saying that most of the time, because there are really times that we do not feel okay, or we do not feel like we are in the mood to communicate. But make sure that when you communicate, remember, you are committed. When you communicate, you have to be committed. So make sure that when you communicate, then you also have the positive aura. You are in a good condition, so that there is smooth flow of communication. Then the third one is you have to choose the best medium. If you think that you're a good speaker, then you may deliver your message uh, via, or in a spoken manner or oral manner, okay? But when you think that you can best deliver your idea through writing, then have your message sent, for example, via email or via letter, okay? So that depends on the medium of communication, okay? So it could be nonverbal, could be verbal, so that depends on the communicator. Then study your audience. If you remember, during our Gmeet session, I emphasized that you have to know who your audience are, or who your audience is, and you have to know the purpose why you are communicating, so that your the topic will be of the interest of your audience, and they can relate to what you say or to what you talk about. Okay, so you have to study your audience, so that when you also speak, they can also share meaningful insights or meaningful ideas. Okay, another one is be enthusiastic. This is also the same as being positive. So be enthusiastic, be eager to listen, be eager to share your ideas, because again, when you communicate, you are committed, you are engaged in the communicative event or in the discourse. And lastly, you have to maintain intense focus. That means you have to pay attention to what the speaker tells you, or you have to pay attention to what the speaker shares with you. Okay? So that when it is your time to talk, they will also listen to you attentively. So that is give and take relationship. Okay? So these are the principles of communication, and these things could help us have meaningful communication and to make the process successful. I hope everything is clear, but if you have questions, please comment them or please post them in the comment section in the open forum. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. I will see you again in our next video discussion.